There is so much happening in the telecommunications ecosystem today. It's absolutely spectacular. We're seeing a lot of strong results around mobile trends. The trends continue to grow and grow in a variety of different areas. We're seeing more and more penetration with wearables, and we're seeing more and more consumers using their smartphones for more and more activities in today's ecosystem. Seeing a lot more on the consumer side around connected vehicles, connected homes, smart video, even smart locks that can be accessed by your mobile device. The smartphone is the absolute center of everything we're seeing in the connected consumer lives. In the US alone, consumers look at their smartphones an average of 47 times a day. That's about 12 billion looks in the US alone. We're expecting that smartphone penetration will be over 90% by 2023 in developed markets globally. And on the enterprise side, we see a lot of opportunities for growth in enterprise IoT over the coming year. We're going to start seeing 5G being rolled out in 2018 and beyond. We had a report on the economic impact of 4G, and it was huge. Hundreds of thousands of jobs being created in the US alone. Tens of billions of dollars of GDP impact alone in the US. And I expect 5G to be multiples of that. The ability to have true broadband connectivity, very, very low latency once this technology comes out. IoT examples are going to skyrocket. Healthcare is a perfect use case. The autonomous vehicle, these are all strong cases that 5G is going to drive. Another key theme is around security and privacy. Today's consumer has some concern around device security. And the problem is with more and more connected things, that goes beyond the device. So smart home, for example. In our global mobile consumer survey, we saw some feedback from consumers that there is a security challenge with some of the connected home features, including connected cameras, connected door locks, etc. The perceptions hindering the penetration of a variety of things, using your smartphone for M-payments, for example, for again, the perception that that may not be as secure as credit cards. There is an opportunity there to both educate the consumer, to make them aware of the security, but there's also an opportunity around managing those fears and managing the expectations and potentially managing the security features for the connected consumer. I am really excited about all the things coming out with mobile, telecom, and the overall connected ecosystem. 2018, we believe, is going to be ripe for more growth in the connected consumer ecosystem overall.
Common problems in my practice, and it's gotten worse in recent years. I've been in practice 27 and a half years, and I can see the changes in my own professional lifetime. One of the biggest issues now is insomnia. Even people who aren't cancer patients always have anxiety, but even people who aren't cancer patients will come in with their biggest complaint is sleep. They haven't slept well in years. They can't fall asleep. They wake up in the middle of the night. And melatonin is produced in the pineal. It's a wonderful hormone that's derived from the amino acid tryptophan through serotonin. It's very complex, but it's a wonderful hormone that's basically the sleep hormone that sets the sleep cycle in humans, and it's really very, very critical. And one of the problems with EMFs that I found, and I believe this to be the case, seen some research, is that EMFs disrupt melatonin, which shouldn't be that surprising. You know, the pineal, which sits in the middle of the brain, is a very small gland, but that's where melatonin is produced. And it's very responsive to light. I mean, it actually operates based on light. When the sun sets, normally, you know, we're designed that when the sun sets, we should go to bed. The pineal starts pouring out melatonin, and melatonin has a sedating effect. Not only does it have a sedating effect, it has a documented anti-cancer effect. In fact, there are clinics in Europe, conventional clinics, that will use 40 up to 80 milligrams of melatonin a day. A normal dose for sleep might be 1 or 2 milligrams. They're using high-dose melatonin effectively to treat cancer. It not only has a cancer protective effect, which has been documented particularly for things like breast cancer, but it has an anti-cancer effect and is being used in treatment regimens for cancer. Now, one of the problems with EMFs is it disrupts the pineal. And again, it shouldn't be surprising because the pineal is light responsive. Light is an electromagnetic energy. That's what it is. So the fact that EMFs are not going to disrupt the pineal is, it's logical neurophysiologically. We would expect EMFs to disrupt, if anything else, the pineal, which exists to be sensitive to light. As the rays of light decrease as night comes, the pineal turns on and sends off melatonin. Well, EMFs can mimic light. And the light that actually is, when the sun rises, we wake up because all light, whether it's synthetic, artificial, natural, or synthetic, gives off a blue wavelength. You can't see it, but all light has a blue wavelength that stimulates the wake-up center in the brain. It shuts down melatonin. Now, blue light is an electromagnetic field. That's what it is. It's an electromagnetic energy, although it's called blue. You can't even see it. EMFs work like blue light. And they basically directly stimulate the pineal like the blue wavelength and turn off the pineal, shut down melatonin production, and disrupt sleep. And people will sleep lightly, or I have patients that they'll sleep 2 hours a night. It's because they're not producing any melatonin. Why? Well, they were on their computer all night, which gives them from the light, the blue light, but also the EMF, which works like a blue light. And that will disrupt the pineal and the production of melatonin, and it's increasing their cancer risk. There's no question that low melatonin levels are associated with increased levels of cancer, particularly hormone-dependent cancers like breast or prostate cancer. So there's no question that the EMFs are having a profound effect on the pineal, and as a result, a profound effect on sleep patterns. I mean, insomnia is epidemic. The costs of sleeping pills in the U.S. is in the billions, and it's among the most highly prescribed drugs. And what's the reason for that? It's the melatonin disruption. What's interesting is some of the newer drugs like Lunesta are actually trying to mimic the normal melatonin production and encourage melatonin production. Of course, there's a much easier way of doing it, but it's not prescription. You take melatonin. Why take a drug to stimulate melatonin production when you can take melatonin? Or an even smarter way is to try and avoid EMFs, particularly late at night when you want to go to bed, because that's going to have the same effect as blue light and turn off the pineal, stimulate the active centers in the brain as if it were daylight, and you're not going to go to sleep. EMFs can have the same effect as full sunlight, even if you're in a completely dark room. That's why the sleep experts, even conventional sleep experts, tell people if you want to sleep well, keep all the electricity out of your room. Even conventional sleep center specialists, who notoriously are 100 years behind everything, are starting to tell patients you got to have no computers in the room, no iPhone, you can't be on your iPhone. The reason is not only the blue light from the light of the screen, which will stimulate the active centers, but the EMFs work like a blue light and shut off the pineal, shut off melatonin.
Goldberg, please come forward. We look forward to your testimony in opposition to the legislation. You have 5 minutes, ma'am. Please proceed.
And committee members, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Sharon Goldberg. I'm an internal medicine physician. I've practiced medicine for 21 years, and my background is mostly academic, internal medicine, hospital-based, clinical research, and medical education. I am going to skip many of the things I wanted to say because I didn't realize it was only 5 minutes. Wireless radiation has biological effects, period. This is no longer a subject for debate when you look at PubMed and the peer-reviewed literature. These effects are seen in all life forms: plants, animals, insects, microbes. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There is no question. We have evidence of DNA damage, cardiomyopathy, which is the precursor of congestive heart failure, neuropsychiatric effects. So 5G is not a conversation about whether or not these biological effects exist. They clearly do. 5G is a conversation about unsustainable healthcare expenditures. Why do I say this? We've been sitting on the evidence for EMR and chronic disease for decades. And now we are seeing all these epidemics appearing. So diabetes is the first epidemic. I think most of you know the statistics. They're very scary. 1 in 3 American children will become diabetic in their lifetime, and if they're Hispanic females, the number is 1 in 2. So what does this have to do with wireless radiation? Wireless radiation and other electromagnetic fields, such as magnetic fields and dirty electricity, have been clearly associated with elevated blood sugar and diabetes. That is what the peer-reviewed literature says. It is not opinion. The closer you live to a cell tower, the higher your blood glucose. That is based on hemoglobin A1C measurements. So the idea with small cells of putting the cells closer to people's homes and bedrooms scientifically is very dangerous. And from an economic perspective, it's dangerous. And you may not know this. I was shocked to find this out. But the way you create a model of diabetes in rats in the lab is by exposing them to 2.4 gigahertz. And this is not for long-term exposure. So I don't have time to talk about the costs, but the huge problem with diabetes really is chronic kidney disease. End-stage renal disease, the worst complication of diabetes, leads to hemodialysis. Hemodialysis is an automatic qualification for Medicare. And if you don't qualify for Medicare, we still have to dialyze the patient. And the state ends up paying in many different instances. So renal failure is 1% of Medicare, but it takes up 7% of all Medicare expenditures. I don't have time to talk about this anymore, but once again, so the other epidemics that clearly link from the science with electromagnetic radiation are related to mental health. And this is straight from PubMed. This isn't my opinion, this is science. Okay?
Dr. Goldberg, for those of us who aren't physicians, what is PubMed?
I'm sorry. It's just it's our National Library of Medicine. This is where you would go. This is just the peer-reviewed literature. So we have 3 epidemics that clearly, they're essentially one epidemic. We have deterioration of mental health in the United States. And if you look really at the science, what does it show? And these epidemics are our suicide epidemic, epidemics in violent, shootings, and the opioid epidemic. And I don't have 5 minutes is not the time to talk about this. This is in the peer-reviewed literature. I have a file to submit for the record, but these are facts. These are things that have just been glossed over by the wireless industry, and I really don't have time to talk about them in 5 minutes. I wish I did. But we need to examine our epidemics in the context of our EMF exposures. What does that mean? That means that the CDC, tracking these epidemics, we need to start measuring how much radiation are people being exposed to. And before we roll out 5G, and this means there are 4 kinds of electromagnetic fields that we know are harmful to human health. So radio frequency radiation, magnetic fields, dirty electricity, and electric fields, okay? Our exposure, any given person, and all humans are affected by EMFs. Our given exposure has nothing to do with the research that my colleagues are going to cite with the National Toxicology Program. That is an assessment of the risk of 1 cell phone in the near field, okay? What is our exposure in a day? It's not 1 cell phone. It's cell phones, it's multiple wireless networks, it's smart meters, it's cell towers. It's this sandwich, and it all adds up. And this is a serious problem for occupational health, public safety, and personal safety. And I feel that it's irresponsible to be even talking about the Internet of Things and rolling out a new untested technology when we're not even measuring what are our current exposures from the current networks.
Doctor, appreciate your testimony. Would you again provide us with your credentials? You said at the beginning.
Yes, I'm an MD. I'm board certified in internal medicine. I've been assistant professor at different medical schools, mostly in New York, most recently the University of Miami. And I got interested in electromagnetic fields after my administrator at the University of Miami gave me a new iPhone. I used it for 20 minutes on speaker, and my finger was burning at the end of the call. So that was years ago. I started reading about the science and connecting with other scientists, and really my expertise, I've taken care of a lot of patients with chronic disease. So when I talk about diabetes and, for instance, heart failure, that, the National Toxicology Program shows clear evidence of cardiomyopathy in that study. In other words, that's a precursor to congestive heart failure. And I want to just read one thing, if you'll allow me. This is from the United States Renal Data System, Healthcare Expenditures for Persons with Chronic Kidney Disease. So over half of the 2015 Medicare spending for beneficiaries aged 65 and older was for those who had diagnoses of CKD, diabetes mellitus, or heart failure. All three of these conditions, when you look as an independent scientist, not someone who's funded by wireless, all of those three conditions are linked. So diabetes and heart failure are linked with EMF exposures. It's very clear.
Doctor, what are your trained medical professional?
Yes.
We don't have one on the panel. What are we to make with of the American Cancer Society, for example, telling us there's no evidence of harmful product?
Well, at this point, there's a national and international 5G appeal. I don't know how many thousands of people have signed, but the point is that many of these organizations have conflicts of interest, and I can't speak to, I don't know who's on their board, who made these decisions. My testimony comes from, I've been reading this literature for years. And really I got interested in it because I spent my career taking care of so many patients who were sick in the hospital that when I found out about the links, I was just shocked. I couldn't believe it. So I've read these articles myself, and the experts who don't work for Telecom and who are in their independent research, everyone comes to the same conclusion. This isn't, we're not in a place where we should be debating this anymore. This is exactly what happened with tobacco. It's the exact same thing. And really, right now, the only people protecting, the only people who are able to protect Americans are our legislators, because we don't have any relevant regulatory guidelines to protect human health. The FCC guidelines were developed for short-term exposures, 6 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on it's a phone or an outdoor exposure. And they have absolutely no connection to the biological effects that have been very clearly summarized in the Bio Initiative. That's a huge document generated. All of the summaries are there. I've got it here for you if anyone wants to read it. I have very concise summaries and abstracts documenting everything that I'm saying. So I know there are plenty of people here that are probably rolling their eyes, but in academic medicine, we have a name for what's happening now with 5G. This is called, and what has happened with wireless communication, this is called, 5G is an untested application of a technology that we know is harmful. We know it from the science. This is, in academics, this is called human subjects research. Human subjects research is very tightly regulated. You can't just roll out some type of a research project on human beings unless A, you have their informed consent, so they understand the risks and benefits, and B, you have the approval. Like someone has actually, examined the literature and said, okay, this research project, we believe that it's safe. There's no evidence in the science to indicate that it would not be safe. We have decades of evidence to show that it is not safe.
Thank you, Dr. Goldberg.
Thank you.
I mean, one of the biggest consequences of wireless is sleep disruption, whether it comes from cell phone towers, cordless phones, cellular phones, Wi-Fi, etc. I know when I was in Smithers, British Columbia, we were fly fishing for steelhead. My youngest son, who's a naturopath, who's a little electrosensitive, not as much as my other son, but he said to me, "Dad, I have never slept so well." We were in the woods, we were away from everything, and basically, when you're in that environment, your melatonin is going to go up. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They've showed this in the human model, they've showed it in the rat model, but melatonin does go down in the brain when you're exposed to toxic EMF from high-tension wires, or whether it's from RF. A definite increase in inflammation, definite increase in anxiety and depression. I know Dr. Montano will be talking later. He's an expert in this area, and you should all come to his talk, but he lectures on anxiety and depression and ADD and ADHD all over the United States. Hypertension is also an effect that we're seeing in patients exposed to this invisible electromagnetic field. And my hunch here is that the blood is becoming more hypercoagulable. And this, again, since children are more vulnerable to Wi-Fi than adults, whatever you're seeing here is going to be magnified in children. So I don't want to see this in children, but hypertension in children, could be a factor depending on how long they're exposed, how many years are they exposed to Wi-Fi. So we might be creating a whole subset in the society where we're seeing hypertension in teenagers and young adults. But the genesis of hypertension basically is when you're exposed to any electromagnetic device, it thickens the blood. We call it hypercoagulability of the blood. And when that causes stasis of the blood, basically it puts more shear forces into the vasculature, and blood pressure goes up. Tinnitus is ringing in the ears, and this is the most common cause of tinnitus, or ringing in the ears, and now hearing loss in the United States are cellular phones. So it goes like this. You may get a little ringing in your ears first, followed by some hearing loss, followed by possible brain tumor with long-term use. Again, in children, since they're more vulnerable, if the children are complaining to their parents, geez, I'm hearing ringing in the ears, think of Wi-Fi, electromagnetic waves, and the invisible electromagnetic field. Headaches is really the most common symptom these children will face. You heard all these children who were talking at Mountain View and Collinwood, you heard them say, "I get this pressure in my head." What that child is saying, basically, is that I have autonomic dystonia. That's the words that doctors use. I have a problem with my autonomic nervous system.
11 tonight, good for cell reception, but bad for children's health. Parents are fighting back against a proposed cell phone tower, and it's right on the grounds of an elementary school. Our Richard Reeve has been speaking to parents about this tonight. He joins us live in Fairfax with both sides of the debate tonight. Rich, what's everyone saying about this?
Yeah, Allison, we all love our cell phones, but cell phone towers here in Fairfax County, for some parents, maybe not so much. A lot of them showing up at a meeting tonight that is still going on. Let's take you inside to show you what's going on here. Dozens of parents showed up. They were wearing red to symbolize their opposition to a cell phone tower that's proposed at Crossfield Elementary. It would be about 140 feet high. It would be about 50 feet from a playground. And many of the parents here say they are concerned. They say that a cell phone tower on school property like that near a playground, many of them certainly, they say, have health concerns.
This application should have been dead on arrival at the planning office.
That's 17 yards from the edge of the fence where my child plays and my friend's children play, to the cell tower. And it was because I realized no one trustworthy would put a tower this close to a playground.
Yeah, a lot of unhappy faces at this meeting tonight. Now, Milestone Communications, the vendor working on the project with Verizon, has had no comment, but Fairfax County Public Schools says the vendor was fully vetted, that there was a public hearing, that they comply with FCC regulations. But some of the parents we spoke with tonight, they say if this project goes forward, they will pull their kids out of that school. Live in Fairfax, Richard Reeve, ABC.
Residents of one Ankeny neighborhood are about to have what they call an unsightly landmark built in their community.
AT&T is leasing a plot of land from the Ankeny School District. They want to build a cell phone tower on the location. It will be in one corner of the maintenance facility on Southwest Pleasant Street. News Channel 8's Hannah Pickett joins us with more. Hannah?
The plan's been in the works for a while, and after it passed through the school board, zoning board of adjustment, and the city, AT&T will build a 140-foot cell phone tower on school property. AT&T is leasing the 50-foot by 50-foot plot of land from the Ankeny School District. The cell phone company is paying the school district $1,000 each month for the use of the land. The school district says the location of the tower won't interfere with school activities since it's on maintenance property, but neighbors near the location have differing views.
Well, everybody was in an uproar. I mean, they couldn't believe that they picked, of all the places in town here in the old section.
This is an area of a maintenance facility that's about 50 feet by 50 feet that really wasn't seeing much use. So being able to lease it to another company over time is probably more efficient, more effective for the school district.
AT&T did have to get a special permit from the Ankeny Zoning Board of Adjustment to allow for the 95-foot height variance for the 140-foot tower to be built. They expect construction will start sometime in June or July of this year.
How long does it take to put one of those towers up, Hannah?
I spoke with AT&T this afternoon, and they told me it takes between 30 and 45 days for the tower to be built start to finish before it's able to be used.
All right, Hannah Pickett.
Well, the group Canadians for Safe Technology points out that the World Health Organization classifies Wi-Fi radiation as a Class 2B possible carcinogen in the same category as lead and DDT. And they say there's no place for it in the classroom. It's a concern that's been spreading across the country. No Wi-Fi! And with the introduction of Peel Region's new BYOD policy, encouraging students to bring your own device to school, Wi-Fi worries have been growing. Christine Cahill picked up a flyer from Canadians for Safe Technology, or C4ST, at Canoli Public School.
I think technology, we need it in the schools, for sure. It's unavoidable. It has to happen. But I'm hoping that the people that are in the right positions and authority make the right research and implement these things in a safe way for the children.
While her kids haven't suffered any ill effects from exposure to wireless routers, Wendy Coburn says her 9-year-old son has.
Gaming and different equipment that I had in my home, as well as in my car, would spark migraines that would turn into vomiting, and I was extremely concerned.
They've now eliminated Wi-Fi at their house and turned mobile devices to airplane mode when necessary. The Peel Board of Education says it's simply following the advice provided by health authorities such as Peel Public Health, Health Canada, and Public Health Ontario, which say there have been numerous studies on radio frequency exposure and its impacts on human health, but that there is no evidence of negative health effects of Wi-Fi. But C4ST President Frank Clegg says there are studies into the health dangers, and the onus should be on the companies and the schools to prove that the technology is not harmful. And as the former head of Microsoft Canada, his concern carries a lot of weight with many.
The concern we have is that particularly children, their bodies absorb radiation at a much higher rate than parents and adults. So we're here, we've got kids that are going into school where it's a 7-8 hour day and they're constantly being bombarded.
Clegg says there's no reason why schools couldn't use hard wires for their computers. He also says teachers should be able to turn off their Wi-Fi so it's not on when the children are not using it. C4ST estimates 3% of people experience some kind of immediate negative health reaction to Wi-Fi, and up to 30% may experience delayed effects. They say those numbers are from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. With today's Lifetime, I'm Pauline Chan.
almost every study that has been done shows some evidence of danger. Now, the other side of the coin here is that there are no studies that have been done on people who use mobile phones that provide conclusive evidence of safety. So that on the human epidemiology side, you have studies that show problems or potential problems and studies that are inconclusive. Now, the industry spins the science and they put it out there for public consumption as though these studies are evidence of safety. It is scientific fraud.
I moved to California, Southern California. The 60 hertz work that we did was supported by a contract from the Department of Energy. The radio frequency radiation work that we did was supported by Motorola. The relationship was really very cordial and very stress-free, but only up until we started generating data. These folks were very, very upset and began to talk about how are they going to handle this, what sort of spin can we put on this, what can we expect from this, and from that point on the relationship changed. What we saw was that Motorola began to exert more and more control over the work, telling us what to do, telling us how to write abstracts, what to say in the abstracts, what to say in the papers. I said, how to do the work. No, don't do this. Yes, do it this way. This was unacceptable. I had completed our study of DNA damage, and I submitted the final report to Motorola, and I got a call from Mays Swycord at Motorola. Now, Mays is the former head of the Center for, CDRA, Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the FDA, and he left the FDA and went to work for Motorola. Keep that connection in mind. That's interesting. He also handpicked his successor at the FDA. Anyhow, Mays didn't like the work. Then there was another phone call. Point is, I kept getting nothing from these people. They simply weren't willing to accept my interpretation of my study, my evaluation of my study, my knowledge of science at that point, and tried to urge me not to publish the study. They didn't tell me not to. They just said, no, this isn't ready for publication. And they wanted me to do more work. I stopped taking calls from them, and I went ahead and published the study. It came out in 1998, and I wanted nothing more to do with any Motorola-related work. I wasn't going to put up with that kind of control. I wouldn't put up with that attitude. That was it. I think one has to exercise caution at this point.
Conflict of interest. Harvard ethics professor Lawrence Lessig calls industry-paid studies which consistently conclude phone radiation is harmless. Independent scientists, meanwhile, overwhelmingly find the most serious problems, from DNA damage, 3 times lower sperm counts, 290% more brain tumours, autism and birth defects. Former senior White House advisor and leading epidemiologist Dr. Deborah Davis has testified to Senate on the subject. She joins us. Great to see you. How do you explain the completely opposite findings between industry and independent studies?
Anytime there was independent research, what industry would do was 3 things. First, they would go attack the scientists who had done the studies. They would try to get them fired, they'd try to get their funding taken away, or they would fraud. Then when that didn't work, they hired other scientists who knew nothing about the field to do studies that looked like they were replicating the other studies, but they really weren't. And when all of those things failed, they wrote a memo in which they said, if the cellular industry done its job, we think war gamed the science. That's a quote. War-gamed the science. Now, science is not a matter of war, not a matter of games. We're deadly serious about our health and that of our children.
Wargaming reveals this leaked Motorola email is industry-paid studies purely for reassuring the public.
We have sufficiently wargamed the issue.
A sting has exposed how easy it is to get phony studies in print. Posing as a serious scientist, John Bohannon sent in a paper full of schoolboy errors, offering payment for publication. Incredibly, more than half the journals in these countries all around the world published it, even lying to the public that the study had been peer-reviewed. Investigative journalist Anthony Gucciardi has broken numerous health scandals. Great to see you. Surely big business wouldn't fake studies to put millions of lives at risk. Do we have documented precedents?
This is exactly like Eli Lilly, which in the 1980s knew that Prozac was leading to suicides and aggressive behavior, the exact opposite effect of what they wanted. They knew that in the 1980s after they conducted the research. They hid the research, and it wasn't exposed until 2005 from the BBC. But then they would have their corporate interests do studies and talk about how great it was. Now, of course, they're required to admit, yeah, that antidepressants do cause suicide, aggressive behavior, pretty much every shooter is on them. When these cell phone companies are forced to admit, yeah, the cell phone radiation does cause brain tumors, you know, it does do all this, and they're already saying this in their manuals. So it's already coming out, but once the public is aware of this fact, it will be even worse. Depressants, it will be even worse than tobacco.
We invited the powerful industry lobby CTIA to discuss the issues raised in this report. They sent this one-line refusal.
Thank you for contacting us, but we will not be able to do this interview.
The industry's most respected journalist is Dr. Louis Slessin, editor of Microwave News since 1981. Louis, great to speak to you. There seems to be a parallel universe, what the industry says and everyone else.
The whole system is broken. People are not being told the truth. It's crazy. You know, it's easy to say we made a mistake on tobacco after we know that tobacco is killer. The point is to take action.
Actions being taken outside the US. France is moving schools back from Wi-Fi to cabled internet. Countries from Germany to Israel and Finland are moving to stop cell phone sales to kids. But Obama just made industry chief lobbyist Thomas Wheeler head of the regulator itself, the FCC. A former administration official calls it another astonishing conflict of interest. So doctors who want parents at least informed of cell phone dangers to their kids say they aren't holding their breath. Seek truth from facts. This is The Truth Seeker.